Hello, I'm Paul Gates. Welcome to Season 5 of The Academics. Joining the panel today is a student, Sydney Spann. She is the editor-in-chief of the campus newspaper, The Appalachian. Welcome, Sydney. Our regular panelists are also with us, of course, Professor Heather Preston and Dr. Dave Spiceland. Today we're celebrating Constitution Day. The purpose of the day is to celebrate the formation and signing of the U.S. Constitution. So, the day is really the 17th, but of course that was Sunday, so we're celebrating it on the 18th, on Monday. Just a little background of the day. Originally, states sort of hit or miss kind of celebrated Constitution Day, but in 2004, Congress declared it to be a national day. And in 2005, the Education Department under George Bush administration, George Bush the Jr. Administration, declared that all universities, all schools that receive federal funds will conduct some sort of educational programming on Constitution Day. And so there have been a wide variety of things done, of course. We've had speeches on campus. I remember going to several of those. This year, we're having faculty, staff, administration, and so forth read the Constitution on Sanford Mall. So, and I'm going to be in that too. I don't know what I'm reading yet. I hope it's the First Amendment, but I'm not sure. But let's talk a little bit about what the Constitution means. Of course, we'll talk about the First Amendment at some point, Sydney. But some thoughts on why we revere the Constitution so.
It's not that long.
No,
it's a very thin document. And the funny thing is, and I point out to my regulation students, that you start with a Constitution, which is like this, and then you go to law, which is like this, and then you get to regulation, which is like this. So all of them build on each other, but the Constitution is the legal basis. We revere law, but we don't want to get into a legalistic kind of frame, I guess. Since
the good you pointed that out, Dave, that it is short, which means it needs interpretation. Is that a good thing? That we have to have? I mean, the Supreme Court's main job is to tell us what the law is by reference to the Constitution. Is that the way to conduct legal business? Not necessarily you, Dave, but Heather, if you want to jump in, Sydney.
Oh, well, you know, legal business, that's spelling out everything to a T. And
right.
Well, of course, you have the spirit of the law versus the letter of the law. Well, I mean, which version are we talking about here? Is it a good thing to have a broad document? Well, you've got to have guidance starting somewhere. There's no way that the writers could have envisioned today's world. So there's always going to be a need for interpretation. I think it's good, certainly in a way, because otherwise, how would we function all these years later?
Is that to say that the text alone is insufficient, and needs interpretation? And whose interpretation? I mean,
well, that's just it. That's where the problems lie, right? So is it insufficient? Well, yes, I think since we do have law and then we have regulations, right? Oh, yeah. That we've kind of set precedents that it's insufficient. I don't want to just say, whose interpretation. There's precedent for that too. Times change, interpretations can change with time. Where that falls, well, I don't know. Who's got the most power in that discussion? And that's where we get into issues.
Well, that seems to be a recent, long-running discussion of, do you go by the original text?
Yeah.
Do you interpret in light of present conditions?
Yeah.
There's two schools of thought on that. The originalists and the textualists versus the people who regard the Constitution as a living document, and that's often how it's described as a living document.
That's how I think of it.
Is that how you think of it, Sydney?
I would personally never want like a strict interpretation of the Constitution. Times change, the people who are interpreting it change. So personally, it wouldn't make sense to have like a strict document telling you this is how things work in America, because it's not going to be the same forever. So
Yeah, can we? Dave?
And you had Hugo Black and William O. Douglas, who were strict absolutists, and whether it was the First Amendment, I'm not sure what they said about the Second Amendment, but it means what it says, and it says what it means. And that's the minority view. Very few people today would say that.
Yeah, no, that it was just the First Amendment, actually, because the Second Amendment in their time, in Black and Douglas's time, had never been litigated, never been taken up to the Supreme Court. But that's exactly right. In the First Amendment, they were absolutists, and it was a significant minority view simply because they were on the court for so long.
But we're talking about human nature. If people could, if they had the ability, would they become dictators, so to speak? And the Constitution envisioned things like that. And the fact that they came out of this revolution, and you know, one of the amendments is that you don't have to quarter troops in your home, you know, which is what they had to do under the British. We look at that and go, well, you know, that's not significant today, but it does raise a privacy issue, you know, those kinds of things.
Privacy comes up a lot in the Constitution.
Oh yeah, and you know, it's a historical document. All documents are creations of a particular time period. They're the products of their time period. And in some ways it did see into the future, but it certainly, like I said, can't be applied to the realities of today, the way that the writers envisioned it. Yeah.
They knew the future would be different.
Yes, they
didn't know.
No one
how
does.
Different. Nobody does.
Yeah.
That's
yeah.
right.
We're surprised daily by that.
That's
So,
right.
yeah.
Do you talk about the First Amendment in the newsroom, Sydney? Do you know, is this allowed? Should we be doing this? Should we be doing that?
Well, I think the generation right now, it doesn't even matter if it's just a newspaper. I feel like a lot of people in my age range talk about the First Amendment probably a lot because it's like all of our freedoms. Yeah, especially in the newspaper, I guess. I mean, freedom of press. A lot of people have been saying with everything that's been going on, fake news, like, and how, I don't know, people have been looking at press nowadays. Like, we have an amendment, you know, in the Constitution saying freedom of press. So it is talked about a lot, and that we should talk about whenever we feel like the citizens need to be informed upon. So, yeah, we do talk about it a lot.
Yep, good.
And there's some Supreme Court cases. The famous one is you can't yell fire in a crowded theater. That it's not absolute, that there are limits. And I like the term expression, freedom of expression versus freedom of speech, because it's broader than just words might be. But you can't do anything you want. There are limits. Problem is, what are the limits?
Well, that's always, defining boundaries is always, you know, a task. That's right. But that's absolutely right, that the freedoms are not absolute. I mean, the court has said, in addition to the to speech that will cause danger and you know, loss of life and property and so forth, obscenity. It took a long time for the court to actually come out and say that, not till the 50s, but it was sort of hinted at before that. I mean, everybody kind of figured it wasn't protected,
Well, the
but
Hickman
nobody
test
really knew.
from the 1860s, and not much was done until post-World War II. Society changed. You had the Hefners and the Playboys and those kinds of things. And it wasn't until, Roth, that there was something about obscenity is not protected expression. Indecency is, and then my students say, what's the difference? And then you have to introduce some court cases and that kind of thing.
Well, the obscenity is not what everybody thinks it is, first of all. It's a very complex, convoluted, and difficult decision to apply, and rarely results in an obscenity finding.
And Potter Stewart didn't say, seriously, I know obscenity when I see it.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
The last day the guy was on the court, the press said, do you have anything you'd like to say? It was a set-up question. He said, yeah, I wished I hadn't said I know obscenity when I see it.
Yeah, what was it? I can't define it, but I know it when I see it.
That's it. I think that's from Jacobellis, is that? Whatever case that is. But yeah, but it's a good example of, you know, how slippery definitions are, and you know, when you're trying to apply them in a framework of freedom, it becomes, you know, a little more of a slippery task.
Yeah, particularly on a college campus, where you know, we always talk about freedom, academic freedom, the freedom to express thoughts that may not be popular for the sake of examining them and the impact on society at large. So yeah, it's a really interesting concept. I love that we celebrate Constitution Week. It's not just a day.
Right, sure.
Well, another social event was World War I. There were a lot of things that happened in terms of World War I that there were some restrictions. There's a religious publication that is part of my religious heritage. They were told before while World War I was occurring, you will not have articles about Christians and conscientious objections or we will shut you down. And that just came out over the last 30 years or so. So there's a lot of things that these social events will do in terms of how we interpret our rights.
Yeah, is that because they were concerned about national security issues?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, the threat to mobilization of the troops and so forth.
Yeah, Near versus Minnesota, cases like
right,
that.
Right. Okay, Sydney, let's talk about the newsroom. Let's
Okay.
talk about what's going on at the Appalachian. Now, you've sort of grown up with the Appalachian online, too. It wasn't that long ago. We can all remember when there was no Appalachian online. We looked for it every Tuesday and Thursday. How has that changed? What does that do to your day? How does that make it? You have deadlines all the time when you're online. One of the challenges of print these days,
Yeah,
or I should say text these days.
And first, just to give viewers a context, because a lot of people don't understand how a newsroom works, what is a typical day like? And then maybe if we could move into that.
A typical day for the newspaper, we have deadlines every single day. It does not revolve around our print product anymore. We have production for our print product on Mondays, Tuesdays, up until the union closes and until like when we get out of classes or in between classes. And then sometimes on Wednesday it goes off to the printer on Thursday. But every single day, stories are being written by our reporters, being sent to the editors. Editors will edit it, and then it's sent off to our chief copy editor. She'll edit it. It's sent off, published on the back end, and then it's put up online. It's basically a 24/7 hour kind of job.
Okay, so that got to
all
your
time.
online question too. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's amazing.
And it didn't used to be like that. Last year we still had all of our deadlines revolving around the print product, but this year I was like, need to be digital first because that's how news is kind of moving. A lot of people my age get their facts and news sources off of like Twitter, which I know some people don't like to hear that, but that's how it is nowadays. So we want to have all of our content up as fast as we can, so it wouldn't make sense to have all the deadlines revolving around our print product, which is only on Thursdays now.
Okay.
Used to be Tuesdays, Thursdays,
Yeah,
and Carl, editor-in-chief before me, moved it to just Thursdays. But yeah, so content's going up every day. We have individual deadlines for every single story so that if it's a breaking news story, we're not just publishing it on Thursdays or publishing it that day because it needs to go out to the audience as soon as possible. It's breaking news. So.
Okay, wow. So it's run by students who have full class schedules
Yes.
and busy lives. And so what happens when you have a breaking news story? Is it all hands on deck, whoever's available? How do you cope with that?
Well, our first breaking news story was the very first day of classes when the white nationalist banner was hung, and I was in my very first class at 9:30. It was an art class, and she was going over the cell phone policy to not be on cell phones. And of course, I was over here like on my cell phone, like get a story out right now. And we have it's called Slack. It's an app, and it's a messaging app.
I use it in my PR campaigns classes.
And a lot of publishers use it because it's really easy to put on all the different channels that everyone's part of, being like breaking news story.
Very transparent. Yeah.
And so whoever picks it up first is the one to write it.
Okay.
Usually we don't have people who just join the newspaper write it just because they might not have that experience to go right on the scene and write a story. But if someone picks it up, I'm not going to say no because it needs to go out. So.
Wow, that really changes how stories are assigned, right?
Well, in fact, maybe an observation and a question. I hear editing, copy editor and this editor and that editing, because that's the nature of the media as you go through these editing processes. As opposed to on my cell phone where I just pick up something like a Twitter or whatever. But have you ever had an instance where somebody writes a story and an editor says, no, we're not going to run the story, we're going to make these changes, and then they get upset and say, well, I have a First Amendment right to publish this. You ever have that happen?
People get really upset all the time when their story isn't published. And that's just a personal thing. I think everyone needs to go through someone saying your story is not going to be published if they want to be in this business, a journalism business. Not every story is going to be perfect, especially if you're first starting off. I'm not afraid to say your story's not going to go in the paper, it's not going online, it's not ready yet. But usually when people are new to the newspaper, we give them evergreen stories and stories that are going to last and they're going to be relevant for a really long time. Breaking news stories or stories that need to go up within the next couple of days don't go to new people just because we're afraid it's going to come in and we're not going to have to say no to it. So that's kind of how that goes. But no one has ever said it's my First Amendment right. I don't think that's everyone's go-to as this moment just because they're just starting off. Maybe when they move on to bigger publication, they'll be this is my right to do this, but it's also our right to say no, just because it's our reputation, our newspaper. We're not going to let a bad story go out there
And it's not really censorship though, because
it's a business.
No,
It's a business.
They don't have a First Amendment right. I mean, Sydney, you're the editor. That's your decision. It's important for people to keep in mind that the First Amendment protects you as the editor and your people that work on your staff, protects them from being interfered with by the administration, by some level of government. There is no such thing as a denial of rights when a private party or the organization you work for says no. That's just the way it works.
And we never really had that problem because when people come to us with a story idea and we think that's not something that's newsworthy, then we're not afraid to say that no, you need to think of another idea, or we work with them to kind of explore their idea a little bit more so that when they do turn it in, we don't have to turn it down because it's already been talked to us a lot. So that's another way we go about making sure that all stories can be published.
Well, sure, that's like a budget meeting. You sit around and you talk about different angles. Well, the one you've just floated probably isn't workable, but try this. And that's how you massage an idea and get it ready to go out, and somebody can really do a good job on it at that point. Yeah, that's other challenges, not necessarily online challenges, although that's interesting. I think the what do you do first? And like you said, you get online first before you worry about the print product.
Yeah.
What else do you find that you have to pay really close attention to make sure things go smoothly?
We have to pay attention a lot to quotes, make sure that what everyone's saying is kind of necessary to the story. We have a really big problem with that. That's not always the interviewee's fault. Sometimes it's the interviewer just not asking enough in-depth questions to get a good quote. Sometimes we'll have a story going on about a concert and the quote is, "Yeah, it was really cool." And that doesn't matter. I'm sure it was cool, but that's not, no one's
doesn't
gonna
provide
think,
any insight or excitement to the
anything.
story.
No.
Yeah.
So I have to worry a lot about quotes. I look at them a lot. Photo captions. A lot of photographers aren't journalism students, they're photography students. They don't know how to write an AP style, or they don't know how the correct format for photo captions. And a photo caption needs to be an extension to the story, not repeating what the story's already said. So that's another thing that we have to worry about. But other than written content, there's also photography that we have to worry about. We also come out with videos, we have a podcast, so there's more to the newspaper than just, we're trying to be a lot more multimedia this year. And we also have a show on App TV, the App Update. So we do a lot of other things other than just written content that I have to worry about.
Well, speaking of written content, let's change this a little bit and talk about a story that was in the most recent issue that's created a little buzz on campus. The story about the SGA effort, and I guess it passed, to have feminine hygiene products available on campus, free of charge. Talk about that a little bit. This is not an everyday kind of story. What are you hearing? What are people saying? How did it come about?
Well, it's I feel like as a woman, it's very necessary to have these things on campus. I saw a tweet the other day saying they shouldn't be giving away free condoms because it's a lot more expensive to be a woman, a lot more expensive to have a menstrual cycle. People have been very receptive to it. It has a lot of shares, probably over 100 on Facebook, which is a lot for us for being such a small town. So people are very receptive. They're very happy with this, just because they're so expensive. Feminine products are very expensive, so it's nice, especially when it's an emergency, to have it. And the student union, we didn't get in trouble because our headline said feminine products, but not all feminine products are used by females, and that can just go into like social issues and stuff. But that's the name of the act. That was it was Free Feminine Product Act. So like that's what was in our headline. But we did change our headline and the wording, but we couldn't legally change the name of an act.
No.
Because that's what
Because that's what they passed.
Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned that, and I'm curious about the controversy because 55%, latest statistics, 55% of the population at App is female, identifying, right? And I did a little research, the cost of being a woman, right? If you calculate everything that would be related to having a period, everything from heating pads through birth control, it's $12,000 for a woman. That's extra. That's what it costs.
A year or
yes. Or for a lifetime. For a lifetime. Yeah.
Yeah.
$12,000 for a lifetime. That's the cost of being female.
And so for now, at least in that regard, the SGA is going to foot the bill. Is that where the funding's coming from, or
They're going to what?
is SGA footing the bill, or is Student Affairs going to pick up the tab?
From what I got from the article and who we interviewed, it already fits in with the budget, so they don't have to spend extra money for it. That's just for the student union. It's only in the student union right now, and they're hoping to spread it to different residence halls, which might take out some money. But for right now, student union, we don't have to pay anything extra, neither does SGA or anyone else.
Okay, well that's about our time, and we have something new to close out the show. We're going to ask Professor Preston to give us a fun fact about the history of the high country.
All right, well, speaking of fun facts, did you know that Watauga County is named after the Watauga River? And it's a Cherokee Indian name that usually is interpreted as beautiful water or village of many springs.
And I bet none of us knew that.
I did not know that.
No.
Did not know that.
That's it for today on The Academics. I'm Paul Gates. We hope you'll join us next time.